how Jewish people study the Torah, specifically the written Torah. You notice that in Judaism, we don't just throw scriptures or verses around randomly. We're always very careful to make sure that everything's in context and understood with its commentary. Tonight, we're going to dedicate a discussion specifically to one individual, one great sage, not just an individual. And he was the one who literally transformed the ability for everyone to study Torah. And let me explain this. I'm going to explain this first verbally. We're going to see some of the texts, inside in the presentation. But I want to first give a general overview. When you read the Torah itself, you read the Bible itself. You read, let's say you're in Shul, and you're just reading along the translation, or if you know Hebrew, you're reading it in Hebrew. Or let's say the Haftorah. Let's say when it comes to the book of the books of Nach, the books of Nevi'im, which is some of them are recorded in Haftorahs. And you're reading the translation of those, or the translation of any of the 24 holy books that are considered to be the Torah or the written Torah. A lot of it is obviously very cryptic and very hard to understand, and most importantly, very distant from reality or practical reality. So a lot of the laws that even though it says it clearly in the Torah, but there needs to be context. For example, you should write on the doorposts of your wall. It doesn't say what you should write or how you should write it. We need the sages, we need the commentaries to help us understand how to read the Torah. Even if we think it makes sense, as Jews, we always know that there's a deeper meaning and understanding to everything that we read in the Torah. That's basics. Now, there are four levels, or there are four types of Torah study with commentary. And these four, let's just call them four camps or four schools of thought of how Torah could be understood. They were all taught by Moshe to four different groups of the Israelites that were in the desert. And they break into four categories. The first one is called Pshat, which literally means the simple understanding. Pshat means the explanation. What does this mean? Like, there's no deep understanding. Just here's what this means. Like, it's more than translation, but it's what does this mean? Make this make sense. That's Pshat. Halacha, which is Jewish law, falls into the category of Pshat. In other words, learning how to live as a Jew is called the simple understanding of how to live as a Jew. That's called Pshat. So that's one camp, or one school of thought. The second school of thought is called Drush. Drush is from the word midrash, and it literally means lessons or sermons, or the rabbi will give a drash. It comes from the same thing. Like a drash means a sermon. It does not mean law, Jewish law. We don't midrash, or the word drash is not talking about Jewish law, halacha, and it's also not talking necessarily about the simple understanding. It's talking about the lessons that we can learn from Torah study. So learning Torah as an inspiration for how to live life. One of the best examples that my teacher gave me about drash, or about drush or midrash, what does it mean to learn Torah at midrash? The best example is that when we study about Abraham, when he was commanded by God to bring his son Isaac as a sacrifice, which obviously was not intentional, it was more to test him, but Hashem told him not to do that at the end. But it says right after Hashem approached him, it says, Vayakam vayelech, that Abraham rose and he went. And the obvious question that Midrash is going to ask, not Rashi, but Midrash is going to ask, not from Pshat, because from Pshat it makes sense. He rose, he got up, and he went. That makes sense. You don't need any Pshat explanation. What does Midrash ask? Why do you need both words? If it says he went, he obviously had to get up. So what does Midrash tell us? Midrash tells us that there's two types of people. There are people that are really good starters. They're really good at getting up. They're really good at like getting something off the ground, initiative takers, energizer bunnies, people that just are really good at that. But sometimes those people are, even though they're really good starters, they're not good finishers. They're not consistent. They're not necessarily reliable to complete what they started. These types of people are usually like full of half-done projects. And we all have some of this within us, so we're not talking about anyone specific per se, and don't feel, demoralized if you identify like this, because it's human nature, and it's actually a very good thing if you know how to be an initiative taker. Then there are people that are vayelech, that are consistent. They're straight. They are able to follow through on something. They're reliable. They're accountable. They may not be good initiative takers. They're not good at starting things. They're not good at being the innovator or the whatever. But they're really good at being consistent with what they are doing. And the Torah is teaching us that Avraham had both. Avraham incorporated both the initiative taking as well as the consistency of follow through. And what we want to try to do is be like Avraham, or even if we're stronger in one of these, we still try to take both elements. That's an example of Drash. That's Midrash. Then there's Remez. Remez means like a signal. In Hebrew, when intersection in Israel is called a Ramzor. And when they were developing the modern Hebrew language, the word Ramzor actually comes from the two words Remez Or, which means a signal of light. So Ramzor is an intersection because, traffic lights. So Remez means like a signal, or a hint. So it's not necessarily an obvious hint, but it's like a hey, there's like a little treasure hidden here, like a little so if you're playing a treasure hunt, so you have little clues and hints. That's what remez really means in translation. But in terms of Torah study, it's when the Torah has a hint to something interesting. So gematria, like the numerical value of a word, and what it adds up to, and how it teaches us something to make connections. That's called a remez. It's basically learning the codes of the Torah. Not necessarily the esoteric or the deep Kabbalistic codes, but more just like the hints the Torah is giving us to teach us, whether it's interesting facts, whether it's interesting lessons. So yes, it plays on Drush as well, but it's specifically learning Torah with that, trying to find the concealed element as well. There was a great sage known as the Tur, who was also a big halachic scholar, but he lived in Barcelona, in I think the 1300s or the 1400s. Sorry, the 1300s, not the 1400s. 1400s was terrible. He lived in Barcelona, and his name was Rabbi Yaakov Balaturim, and he wrote a Torah commentary focused specifically on this way of study, which is called the Remez, through the Gematria, learning Torah with Gematria. The last one, so we have Pshat, which is the basic explanation, halacha, Jewish law. We have Drush, which is the midrash, learning lessons. We have Remez, which is like the hints and the codes. And we have Sod, the last one is Sod, and that is the esoteric, the deep secrets. Sod means a secret. So here we're talking about the Kabbalistic ideas, and the deeper secrets of godliness and God's creation of the world and God's messages in the Torah. That is represented in Sod. So Kabbalah falls into Sod. The deep mystical things that are meant to be kept secret are referred to as Sod. So those are the four camps or four schools of thought of studying Torah. Now, in order to study Torah at all before the year 1040, in other words, in the first 2,500 years of the Torah's existence, you had to excel in one of those four areas. In other words, you had to know how to study Torah with one of those four styles in mind. You cannot just study Torah without that. You had to have either a mentor, a teacher, or someone educate you on one of those four things, or more than one, but Torah had to be studied with those types of assistants in order to understand it. Until Rashi came along. Rashi was, as we have on the screen, Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki. There's a beautiful story. Maybe if we have time, I'll tell it later, of how of his birth, how his father gave up his father was a jewelry merchant, and he gave up, and found out that one of his jewels was going to be used for idol worship, and he tossed it into the sea, losing a tremendous fortune, but to save the fact that his jewel shouldn't be used for idol worship. And he was told that, because of his great deeds, he's going to have a son who's going to brighten the world even greater than that stone. Anyways, I just shortened the story very quickly, but Rashi grew up to be one of the greatest Torah scholars, specifically for simplifying and understanding and making the Torah accessible to everyone to study. And now we're going to learn how he did that. And we're going to really attribute this to this individual and what he what he was able to accomplish, and then how the Rebbe brought that knowledge to us in a even more simple way to understand it. Now, one of the things I want to say about simplicity is that, in marketing, anybody who studies marketing knows that the key to good marketing is simplicity. You have to keep it simple. They say, well, keep it simple and stupid. In other words, it has to be obvious and has to be clear what you're trying to communicate, so everyone's able to pick up on the messages that you're trying to say. Well, lahavdil, to separate that to something holy like Torah, with Torah study, in order to fully understand something, what makes a teacher great, what makes a scholar great, is not just that they know how to study, not just that they're really good at understanding and have a depth of knowledge and know the entire Torah inside out, and live according to the Torah, but having the ability to communicate the Torah in a way that is simple and easy to understand, was one of the greatest assets that Rashi brought to the world. And we are still reaping the benefits of Rashi's greatness. So here's some of the praise of some of the greatest scholars and sages during Rashi's time and also after Rashi's times. This is like, these individuals, you'll recognize who they are, but I just want to read some of them. So this is like his testimonials. I see it. Someone's hands up. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, before you go on, I just want to thank you for giving us all this background on Rashi. It's funny, but the other day I was wondering why we always quote Rashi. And it's funny that I was thinking of it, and now you give us a wonderful background. So I just wanted to thank you before you went on.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And honestly, it's thanks to the Torah Studies team that puts this content together. But also the real thank you goes to the Rebbe, who really dedicated years and years of his talks in order to understand the depth of Rashi's explanation. In other words, the sometimes with simplicity, I think there's a great quote. There's a quote about this, but sometimes the best simplicity requires the most depth, knowledge, and understanding in order to be able to perfectly, simply give over the Torah concepts in the way Rashi does. And we're going to see that now in this class. So we're just going to read right now some of the testimonials of who Rashi was. In the Torah, you might remember there's a prophecy from Bilam in the portion of Balak where Bilam predicts the future of King David as well as the coming of Mashiach, and he says a star will shoot forth from Jacob. So borrowing that term, he says a star has gone forth from France, because Rashi was from France, a community established on firm foundations. An awe-inspiring commentary he penned with, I don't know what that word is, but the Parshan Dasa means with like a simple, powerful faith that Rashi had in addition to his knowledge, that he was able to communicate this commentary. His is a book of redemption for all who question pleasing the nation of Israel. So simply put, you cannot study the Torah, any part of the Torah, whether it's the written Torah or the Talmud, without Rashi. There are a lot of anti-Semites who like to quote Talmud as a way of pointing out certain things that make Jews look bad. But if you don't study Talmud with Rashi, then you're not studying Talmud. It's impossible. You're totally getting a misquote or misunderstanding, because Talmud is very codified, and Rashi helps uncode it for us to make it understandable. In fact, if you use the Art Scroll translation of the Talmud, which many people do today, included in the translation, and it has the bold versus the non-bold text, is Rashi's commentary, because you can't study Talmud without Rashi. All right. This is Nachmanides, who lived not too long after Rashi. He says, I will place the illumination before me, the lights of the pure candelabra, which is the quote about the menorah. He basically is using, thank you, David. Sorry about that. So it's like a nickname. Okay. So here he says that the Ramban is quoting a verse about the menorah, the brightness and the illumination of the menorah, and he's applying this to Rashi, that his commentary was like the illumination of the menorah, crown of glory, and really just the illumination of the entire Torah. To him go the rights of the firstborn, I will study his words with soaring love. The Ramban, by the way, Nachmanides was not a easy individual to please. He was a very, if you study Nachmanides, he's very... That's the right word for this. He's very down to earth, to put it simply. And he didn't just accept, commentaries or accept opinions without pure clarity, and he would challenge them. He challenged Maimonides. He challenged a lot of great sages. For him to be saying this about Rashi is really a powerful testimonial. The Meiri, another great commentary on the Talmud, writes this: chief among all commentators is Rashi of blessed memory. If his attackers are numerous, he is equipped to defend. Attackers meaning people who would argue on his commentary. He is equipped to defend them with words. Only select thinkers discern his greatness, deflecting bundles of questions with but a word. In other words, he can answer everything with just one word, which we're going to see soon how he does that. So, in other words, Rashi's commentary was simplified, but it contained such depth that that it was so that you could, if you learn Rashi with that depth, you could see how smart he was by being able to simplify the Torah the way he did. Now, very important, Rashi was not just another human being. The Shalah, one of the great Kabbalists, the Shalah from the 1500s, writes that Rashi wrote his commentary with divine inspiration, with Ruach HaKodesh. In other words, in fact, all of the commentaries, these sages wrote their books of their Torah books with divine inspiration, but Rashi specifically was writing it with Ruach HaKodesh. Ruach HaKodesh means, I'm going to try to explain it a little bit, but Ruach HaKodesh means that when someone is completely dedicates their life to Hashem and to Torah study, their entire being, their entire essence becomes a reflection of godliness. Their entire life, their physical life also becomes holy and spiritual. And because they're so dedicated to God and to Torah, Hashem reveals in their brains and in their intellect the divine inspiration of what the Torah is teaching us. So even though they have to use their physical intellect to write down their opinions, especially halachically, but the divine inspiration is that God is helping them come to the right conclusions, so we could accept their words as holy words. In other words, it's not just a book of a human being, but it's a book inspired by godliness through that individual. There's more to talk about this idea of Ruach HaKodesh, but the point here is that Rashi was a holy man, and the words that he wrote were words of Torah, words of holiness that were inspired by godliness through Rashi, through him as an individual. Now, here's another important point about Rashi, that he was very precise with his words. He never uses an extra word. So even if you study Rashi, you'll notice, so like when he quotes words in a verse, he'll choose a few words of what his commentary is going to be about. So the Rebbe points out many times why Rashi chose certain words and not other words, and why he left out a word here or added a word here. Everything was very, very precise. And here, here he says even a single extra letter is hinting at what Rashi would at what Rashi was trying to communicate. And of course, there are many commentaries on Rashi, the commentary. In other words, there are plenty of commentary on understanding what Rashi is saying. Chief among them is Tosfos, that is, if you open a Vilna edition of the Talmud, which is the main layout of the Talmud, so you have Rashi on the left of every page, and then you have Tosfos, which is a gathering of many sages, but led by his grandson Rabbeinu Tam, which very often will challenge Rashi, but then come to the explanation of what Rashi is saying. And there are many other commentaries on Rashi. That's how deep Rashi's commentary was. Now, this is where the Zohar teaches us about the 4 types of study. Remember we talked earlier, and as an introduction, I explained that there's 4 schools of thought in studying Torah. So here's where the Zohar is explaining that you can understand the Torah on 4 levels: the plain understanding, which is pshat. Then you have the rayot. So here it puts remez first. Rayot is remez really. It's like the signals or the codes, or it's still secret meaning, but it's kind of hinted at it. And then of course there's the drashot, and then there's the mystical understandings. So anything beyond this is secrets upon secrets known only to God. So basically, there's parts of Torah that no human being, even Moshe Rabbeinu, doesn't know and understand, because it's coming from God's wisdom. But God allowed us as human beings to break down the Torah study into these 4 levels, or to one of these 4 levels, or a multiple of these 4 levels. So there are those that are really, really good at simple. When I say simple, I don't mean simple in the way it's taken, but simple as to understanding the real fundamental meaning of what the Torah is teaching us. And there are those who excel with the codes, and there are those who excel with the lessons, and there are those who excel with the Kabbalistic meanings, and some excel at all of them. But the point is that there are multiple ways to study Torah. Now, those are the breakdown. So what was Rashi trying to do? Because up until then, you had to be able to study Torah within one of those four ways. So Rashi was trying to include all of them in a way that he could simplify it and make it understandable to even a 5-year-old. When we say 5-year-old, we mean even a 5-year-old, the 5-year-old within us. So it can mean a literal 5-year-old, but it could also mean, because it says in the Pirkei Avot that ben chamesh lemikra, that when someone is 5 years old, that's when they should start studying Torah. But even the 5-year-old among us, that sometimes we need to have that 5-year-old understand, explain it to me like I'm a 5-year-old kind of thing, because we have to understand it in a simple way. So here's what Rashi himself writes. There are many Agadic, which Agada means like stories or analogies, or midrash. These were arranged by our sages in the proper order in the Midrash, Bereshis Rabbah, and other midrashic texts. I, however, have come only to teach the plain meaning of the text, the Pshutit Shel Mikra, the simple understanding, and I will also use such Agadic texts that clarify the plain meaning of the biblical text, each word in its proper way. So this caused a problem, okay, for many people when he first wrote this, because let's go back a second to the four ways of studying Torah. It says you can study one of, literally pshat, pshat, remez, drush, and sod. Remez is the codes, drush is the midrash, and four is the esoteric. You can study one of these four ways. So Rashi comes and says, I'm going to teach the Torah in the simple way. In other words, up until then, you had to pick one. So Rashi is saying, I'm going to teach Torah according to the pshat, according to the way of simple understanding. However, I'm going to use the Agada, and the esoteric. I'm going to use some of these others to make this more simple. But that didn't make any sense, because you can't either you're studying the esoteric or you're studying this. How do you mix the two? So it was a little confusing for people, because on the one hand, he was saying that he's going to teach the pshat, but really he was also mixing in some of the other ways of Torah. And what's really happening here, and this is what the Rebbe explains, is what Rashi was doing is by illuminating the source and all the other three ways of studying Torah, he was actually supporting the simple understanding of Torah as well. So in other words, you might have a midrash, or you might have a gematria, a code, or you might have a Kabbalistic meaning of something that contributes to the simple understanding of a verse or of a lesson or of Jewish law, and therefore he's going to use that and simplify it, even though it's been reserved forever just for those people that know how to study that way. He's going to figure out a way to use that to support the simple understanding. That's the brilliance of Rashi. So it's not just that he's coming to highlight one area of Torah study, but he's actually going to use the other three, which are usually reserved for special people or people that are excel in those areas, and he's going to simplify them in a way to make the simple understanding of Torah even more meaningful and more understandable. Okay, so we're going to skip this text for a second, because this is just going on. It's kind of going on a little bit more in what we just said. What I want to do now is go to examples of how Rashi would simplify the text of the Torah for people that are studying. So here's what it says in the Pirkei Avot about what you're supposed to do at every age. In other words, that gives us from 5 to 100. But we're only going to do the first few over here. So from 5 years old, they're supposed to study Torah. In fact, 5 years old is when, in most Jewish schools, they start to study Chumash, start to study the text. At 10, you start to study Mishnah. At 13, that's when you become bar mitzvah, and you're supposed to take on the mitzvahs. So Jewish law, what's really saying is that you need to study Jewish law, halacha, go to Jewish law. And at age 15, that's when you can start studying Gemara. You start studying the Talmud, which is, you need to have that intellectual capacity to do that. So that's when you study the Talmud. What Rashi is trying to do is make all of these more simple, but specifically for the Ben Chamesh Lemikra and the Ben Chamesh Asarei Gemara, to make these two more accessible to the depth of what the Torah is trying to teach us, but in a simple way of understanding it. And we're going to see some examples. So first of all, Rashi made it clear, or the Rebbe made it clear that Rashi was making it clear, because I don't think we understood really how brilliant Rashi was until the Rebbe explained it to us. But he's not going to ask every single question. He's not going to answer every single question, but he's going to focus on what would bother a 5-year-old. And once again, the 5-year-old doesn't only mean literally the 5-year-old, but what would bother someone who's trying to just understand the basics of Torah. So those are the questions that Rashi is focused on, And if he doesn't ask it, then either it's not a question, a 5-year-old won't have the question, or he already answered the question somewhere else. In other words, if the question would bother a 5-year-old, Rashi is going to address it. But if he doesn't, then there must be a reason. Either the 5-year-old doesn't have this question, or he already addressed this question somewhere else. So now the Rebbe starts to explain what Rashi's ability and what his approach was in explaining the Torah and simplifying the Torah. Now I want to share that in 1966, 5726, the Rebbe's mother passed away. In the Shabbat after the Shiva, the Rebbe organized a Farbrengen, a Hasidic gathering, and he asked someone to bring him a Chumash. We're going to see it, I think, in the text. And he started to explain. It was the Torah portion of Noach, because the Rebbe's mother passed away on the 6th day of Tishrei. So it was the Torah portion of Noach, so this week that we're in now. And the Rebbe took the first Rashi, started explaining it. That was his commentary for the Hasidic gathering. And from then, for the next 30 years, every Shabbat, the Rebbe would take apart a Rashi and explain it in the most deep and simple explanation at the same time, illuminating the beauty of Rashi and really reframing the way we understand Rashi today. And here's one of those examples. So the explanation for Rashi's comment was debated in several publications, and several answers were offered. In other words, many people would try to explain what Rashi is trying to say. However, each answer took up on average a page and a half. They cited many teachings from our sages of blessed memory and from other commentaries, even citing certain pages and footnotes from my teachings in the Likutei Sichot. However, we must remember that these explanations are presented to 5-year-olds who wonder why we pester them with lengthy lectures. They want a simple and quick explanation of Rashi so they can go and play it. Engaging in lengthy explanations with citations from Hebrew texts, especially texts written without vowels, is off the mark. So the Rebbe took the Rashi's comments about making Torah understandable for a 5-year-old very literal, and said you can't go into a 2 or 3 page explanation of what Rashi means, because that you lost the 5-year-old at the first paragraph. You have to simplify it in a way that Rashi would want you to want it to be simplified, because that's the whole purpose of his commentary. And the Rebbe goes on here to understand this. Rashi wrote his commentary in a manner that his teachings are obvious for a plain reading of the biblical text. In other words, it's not meant to be it's not meant to confuse you. It's meant to simplify, make it easier. Rashi does not rely on the super commentaries of Sifrei Chachamim, Mizrahi, or others to explain his meaning. So yes, there are commentaries on Rashi, but Rashi still wants to simplify it. That's his purpose. So there are hundreds of years after Rashi who wrote his comments. Sorry, he's not relying on those people. Doesn't want to rely on those people. When Rashi taught his students, they understood him without the aids of these commentaries. Therefore, we too should be able to understand Rashi by pursuing the plain meaning of the biblical text. Because he purposely wanted his text to be understood by a 5-year-old, we have to make sure that we understand Rashi that way without those commentaries. Not that those commentaries are bad. They're okay. There's nothing wrong with those commentaries. It's just that the purpose specifically of Rashi was to simplify and to make Torah understandable. Okay. So now let us go into some examples, or to some reasonings of why Rashi did what he did. So there's one commentary on Rashi from the Maharal of Prague. The Maharal of Prague, I don't have to explain who he is. And he explained Rashi in a way that showed how Rashi was well versed in Kabbalah, and was using Kabbalah, using the depths, the secrets of the Torah, to make the simple explanation more understandable. That's what the Maharal of Prague did in his commentary. And the Rebbe was using that, or the Rebbe was referring to this in a way that shows us how Torah is really one. That even though there are multiple ways of studying Torah, and there are multiple ways of understanding Torah, it's all one in a sense that it all ties in together. Even though you can understand Torah from one perspective and another perspective, but it all draws back to the same essence, which is coming from the wisdom of God. And what Rashi was doing was by showing how it all supports each other in a way that we could all understand it, to the point that a 5-year-old can understand it. Why is this important? Because there are those that say that they only want to study a certain type of Torah. They only want to study, like, the written Torah or the oral Torah, or they want to study the commentaries from before 2,000 years ago, or they want to. And what's very important to understand is that every element of Torah is all uniting the Torah, revealing how the Torah is all one. Even though they're at different ages, we study different parts of the Torah, and different types of intellect we study in different ways. But Torah is really one. It's one with God, and it's really one with itself. And even with all the details and all the breakdowns and all the styles, we have to bring it back to the core, which is godliness. And that's what Rashi was doing by showing how Kabbalah, how the secrets of the Torah, how Medrash, how Remez, the codes, and everything was all part of the unity, the oneness of Torah. So let's ask the question, though, if Rashi, the question that we had earlier about Rashi's introduction, if really Rashi is just trying to teach the 5-year-old, why does he bring in all these midrashim and sometimes Kabbalah as well? So the answer is because by doing this, Rashi is able to bring about the purity and the essence of Torah in the simple explanation. And we're going to see him. So this is the story of how the Rebbe started his discussions on Rashi. The Rebbe arrived at his place for the Hasidic gathering. Instead of starting his talk as soon as he sat down, as he usually did, the Rebbe requested that a chumash, a copy of the chumashes, be brought to him. That the Rebbe should request a book during a farbrengen was extremely rare. It was a first indication that something unusual was underway. The Chumash was brought, and the Rebbe opened it up to the portion of Noach and began reading and translating the first passage. He then moved on to Rashi, and he started explaining the Rashi on the Parsha. It was a beautiful scene of hundreds of Hasidim crowded around as the Rebbe sat and taught Rashi like a teacher in Cheder. Cheder means like a school. First translating, then proceeding to ask several penetrating questions, cutting to the very heart of Rashi's words. No one realized at the time, but this was a historic moment. The Rebbe had just quietly and without much fanfare launched a revolution that would accompany every Shabbat farbrengen for the next 23 years and would change the way we look at Rashi. So, let us, what I want to do, I want to skip for a second. Let us go to an example of how Rashi was able to simplify something in the Torah and make it and simplify something in the Torah, but also bring about all the deepest secrets of the Torah. So the Alter Rebbe writes over here that Rashi's commentary is what's called the wine of Torah, because it opens the heart and the surface of our inherent love and awe of Hashem. What does wine do? Not a lot of wine, but a little bit of wine. Wine opens us up. It's meant to get to the, it's a drink that is enjoyable, but it's meant to be enjoyable, but it also opens us up a little bit. So from a spiritual perspective, Rashi is the wine of Torah, where it allows the Torah to penetrate and to really permeate our being, because it's inclusive of all the types of study of Torah. So we don't have the text, but I'm going to give you an example verbally. We're going to talk about this on Shabbos as well. But the first Rashi of the Torah of this week's parsha is that it says that Noach was a tzaddik, that Noach was a righteous person in his generation. Now, the question is, say he's a tzaddik, say he's a righteous person, why does the Torah say in his generation? So Rashi takes the word b'daraisa, takes that word, and he says there's an actual argument amongst two sages, Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish. He doesn't quote their names, he just quotes the argument because it's for a 5-year-old. The names aren't necessary. And he says, one opinion says that Noach was a tzaddik in his generation of evil people, which how much more so he would be a tzaddik in other generations, where he had good people to learn from and to build upon, and he would even be a greater tzaddik. But Rashi brings another opinion that says that Noach was only a tzaddik in his generation compared to the other people. But had he lived in a generation of Avraham or Moshe, he wouldn't have been worth anything. In other words, lo nachshav l'klum. He would be nothing. In other words, his righteousness stuck out because he lived in such an evil generation. So the Rebbe asks a question: why Rashi's here to bring us the simple explanation? Why is Rashi quoting both opinions? Just say the word Doiraisav. Bring the first opinion is to teach us that he was a tzaddik even in his own generation. He was a tzaddik, and how much more so in another generation. Noach's a good guy. He did exactly what Hashem told him to do. So why is Rashi feel it necessary to bring the other opinion? Rashi doesn't just spew knowledge. It's the very not Rashi-like. Rashi is giving you purely exactly what's needed to understand what the Torah is saying. So why is Rashi bringing this other opinion? We're not studying Talmud now. We're studying the Torah. We just need to have the basic understanding. Why does Rashi have to bring the negativity that Noach was only a tzaddik in his generation, but had he lived in a time of better people, of greater people, he would have been nothing? It's pretty strong words. And why did he have to bring that opinion? So the Rebbe explains, there's a few explanations, and the Rebbe talks about this Rashi a few times, but the Rebbe explains that what Rashi is concerned about and what Rashi is trying to offset for the 5-year-old is that in the end of the day, the world was destroyed in Rashi's times, in Noach's times. So yes, he was a tzaddik, and yes, he did what Hashem wanted, but Rashi's concerned that because the Torah is calling him a tzaddik, we might take a lesson that what do you do when you're in a world of evil? You build an ark. You build an ark and you get on the ark and you run away from the world. Evil world is evil. God will punish them. Let's run into the ark. And while it was necessary for the time of Noach, it's not always the right way for a Jewish child to think that when the world is evil, you just run away. There's an element of learning that has to be included, that there might be times when the world is evil and it's our job to fix it. And it's our job to work through, through our own acts of kindness and our own mitzvahs and our own light, that we're able that trying to make a dent in fixing it instead of just running away. So Rashi wanted to make sure that the 5-year-old doesn't get carried away in thinking that Noach is the greatest tzaddik ever. He is a tzaddik, but there's something that we have to take from that because there may not be the right lesson to learn for every situation. That's just one of the many explanations that Rebbe gives on this Rashi, on this one little Rashi, making it understandable why he brought those two opinions. Now, there's a Kabbalistic explanation to this too, because Rabbi Yochanan was somebody who grew up. Rabbi Yochanan was one opinion who grew up in a spiritual environment. He was an orphan, but he grew up amongst Torah sages. He's the opinion that says that Noach was not really a great tzaddik. Reish Lakish, the other opinion, he's the one who was a bandit. He was the one who had to repent and had to change himself to become a Torah scholar. He's the one who says that Noach would have been even greater in a with the right environment, because he appreciated what Noach was going through by living through a tough time. These are things that the Rebbe was able to bring to understand why Rashi brought this specific debate, to make the 5-year-old understand exactly what Noach's righteousness meant. This is just one of the many thousands of examples that the Rebbe brought in Rashi to make it not just understandable, but to understand that the depth of the Agada, the depth of the Medrash, and the deep esoteric secrets of the Torah are here to simplify the understanding for us to be able to learn the Torah in the most meaningful way, but also in a way that permeates us and makes it more understandable. Let's go back to some of the texts that we skipped real quick. So, I've explained many times that our Holy Torah is a single Torah. This is something, by the way, that Hasidus teaches us, but it's something that we're very passionate about in Judaism and Chabad, and not just Chabad, but in Judaism in general. We have to keep this in mind. There's one Torah. Everything is all part of one Torah. So whether you're studying the Chumash or Rashi or Talmud or Midrash or commentaries or code of Jewish law, or you're studying Tanya, whatever it is, it's one Torah. It all comes from God's wisdom. And yes, it's brought down through the intellect of individual sages as God wanted it to be. It's still all one Torah. There's no, this is what's better, more important, not important. Torah is one Torah. The inner dimension of Torah and the halachic dimension of Torah are all one, like a body and a soul. You can't separate them. You can't say, I only follow this part of the Torah, I don't follow that part of the Torah. It's one. You can't just study a text in Isaiah without the Rashi and Metzudas David and the commentaries and start throwing that verse at you and saying that this is what this verse means. You have no clue without the commentaries. It's all one. And that's why we don't just let people throw verses at us, because if they haven't brought it together with the package that God gave it with us through the sages that explained it, it's you're throwing code letters out that you don't even understand what you're saying. I can't even tell you how many times people scream at me Isaiah 53, either in the streets or online or whatever. It's hilarious because Torah study is never about one verse. It's about the whole package. It's about the commentaries. It's about everything that God gave us. It's all part of that one Torah. And what Rashi is bringing through his explanation is uniting all of these elements of Torah that were seen as separate by many groups or many crowds, and showing how they're all uniting in one to make the Torah understandable and meaningful. This means that all the sections of the Torah fit together like multiple parts of a single branch. So the Rebbe often said that Rashi's simple explanation of the text unveiled many wonders, new depths in other areas of the Torah as well. So even though it could be understood very simply, but it also contained many secrets and well springs of wisdom. So there are hidden wondrous teachings in every word of Rashi. This is the Shalah HaKadosh, the famous Kabbalist from 400 years ago. So peruse Rashi's commentaries on the Torah. At face value, you might think it's light reading, but look and you will find wonders. And this is where we read that Rashi is like the wine of Torah. So we read that already. And here's another. The Lavush writes like this: that every word in Rashi's commentary contains revealed understanding and concealed strata. So you have the simple understanding of Rashi, but you also have the secrets of Rashi, and both are true. So let's bring this home with what the Rebbe teaches us. And by the way, the entire year of Torah studies this year is going to be taking apart Rashi's, the Rebbe's talks on Rashi specifically, in understanding the depth of Rashi's teachings, but also bringing together and showing how all four styles of Torah study are all united as one. So here's the Rebbe says: although Rashi's commentary on the Torah explains the plain meaning of the text, it also contains wondrous teachings from other sections of Torah, including the mystical mysteries of Torah. As the Alter Rebbe famously said, Rashi's commentary on the Torah is the wine of Torah. However, to dig through the wondrous teachings in the wine of Torah, we must first study the plain meaning of Rashi's commentary, because Rashi embedded the wondrous teachings in the wine of the Torah into plain meaning of the Torah's text. So it has the simple level, but it also has the depth that is so important that we can only get to if we study the simple level of Rashi, but we can actually discover the wonders of Torah and the deepest levels of understanding Torah by diving into the depths of Rashi. So number one, Rashi is talking to the 5-year-old to make everything simple, understandable for the 5-year-old. And yes, we could all be 5-year-olds to some extent, and we all want the simple explanation. Rashi does not present questions. He explains the Torah, and the questions fall away. We must therefore always determine precisely which question Rashi was addressing, because he's not saying what the question is and the answer is. He's presenting you the answer, and then we have to figure out what the question is, because he's just trying to simplify it for us. Rashi only offers two explanations when neither captures the plain meaning of the text fully. This is very important. So if Rashi says davar achar, sometimes Rashi will say davar achar, another explanation. Very often you'll see that in Rashi. That only, according to the Rebbe, that only happens when the first explanation may not cover, it may not be enough to explain the question he's trying to answer. Therefore, he brings a second one as a way to ensure that the question is no longer a question. However, the two always complement each other. In such instances, the explanation that is presented first is smoother and more conducive to the plain meaning. So therefore, both are necessary. Rashi does not usually cite the source of his teachings. He only cites the source or the name of the person he is if it's necessary to answer a question the student might ask. Otherwise, he's using the least words possible. Very important. And yes, in the intellectual world, it's very important to always quote your sources because it validates the sources. But because Rashi is talking to the 5-year-old, he does not find it necessary to do that. Even though everything he says is could be sourced, he doesn't quote it because for him, he's simplifying the Torah for a 5-year-old, and that's all that he's trying to do. And therefore, the names are not necessary for that specific task. But if he does cite a source, then it means that he's using that source. The name of who he's citing is relevant to the answer he's trying to give, and it makes the answer better and easier for him to give. Number two, another set of principles. Rashi's words are precise. Every word contributes to our understanding of text. If it's extra, we have to always ask why it was included, because it's important for the answer. Rashi begins each comment with a header comprised of the words from the passage he intends to address. These headers are precise. They include every word Rashi addresses, never more, never less. So sometimes we ask why Rashi chose that word or not this word. When unnecessary words appear in the header, or when words appear to be missing, there is a reason, and we have to understand that reason. Rashi only addresses questions that arise in the mind of a 5-year-old. On the other hand, Rashi addresses every question a 5-year-old might ask. So if you think of a question Rashi does not ask, it's either not a question or he already answered it somewhere else. Rashi teaches in the order that the child studies. So Rashi therefore does not ask questions on passages or rely on sources the child does not yet to study. So Rashi is not going to quote something further on in the Torah if the child didn't study that yet, which is very interesting. On the other hand, Rashi expects the child to remember everything taught up till that point. So therefore, if he answers a question earlier in the Torah, he's not going to re-answer it. He's not going to refer back to it, because he expects that you already learned it, you already know it. At the same time, he won't quote a verse that you haven't learned yet, because it has to be understandable and easy for the person who's studying it, as if it's their first time studying it, which is fascinating. Okay, so the key points from this class is that Rashi but the core element of Torah study, without Rashi, you cannot study Torah. It's impossible. You can't study Talmud without Rashi. It just is impossible. If somebody does, then they're not studying it right. And now we get to look forward to studying Rashi on the Torah portions that we're going to read in the next year, the next 50 weeks. We're going to have this opportunity to break down 50 different Rashis in the Torah with the Rebbe's help, teaching us the importance of combining all 4 levels of understanding the Torah that are hidden in the depths of Rashi's explanation, but also simplifying it in a way for us to understand it and be our best. So the ultimate takeaway from this class is that Torah study is a package deal. Torah study can never be done without the elements, the gifts that God gave us through the sages. We don't just study the verses and say this is the only part of the Torah. We must study Torah as a package deal, and it's through that the Torah is actually able to permeate the world and permeate and connect with the world, which is what prepares the world for the coming of Mashiach. May it happen speedily. Thank you all for joining us. And of course, you can ask any questions you have. And I look forward to taking apart our first Rashi next week.
Yeah, thank you. It's going to be exciting studying with Rashi.